What do you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
Welcome back to What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast where we're enjoying a summer of XTC cover bands. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm delighted that after last month's trip to Sydney to talk to Scarecrow people, we are in the company of Fossil Fools, the UK's long-standing XTC cover band, who are gearing up to play at the XTC Convention in Swindon this month, September, and again at the Water Rats in London's King's Cross on the 29th of October 2022. Before I introduce them, I have to extend my customary thanks to the fantastic supporters on Patreon who make this podcast possible. It would be great if you could join them. All the details are at patreon.com/Mark Fisher, where you can choose your level of support and whether you should join the Pink Things, the Humble Daisies, or the Knights in Shining Karma. If you choose to join the Knights in Shining Karma, I'll read out your name at the end of every episode. And don't forget that if you head to xtclimelight.com, you'll be able to buy a copy of What Do You Call That Noise, an XTC Discovery book. Among many other things, the 228-page book includes a chapter by David White about cover bands, who he found everywhere from Vancouver to Los Angeles and Japan. And among the musicians David interviewed were Terry Arnett and Ed Percival, founder members of Fossil Fools, all of whom are with us here today. So let's give a big welcome to Terry Arnett on drums and percussion. Hello, Terry.
Hello.
To Ed Percival on vocals, guitar and keyboards. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
To Dan Farmer on keyboards, guitar and vocals. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Mark.
To Matt Bell on bass. Hello, Matt.
Hello, viewers.
And we may well be joined by Jake Crawford on guitar and vocals at some point during the podcast. We'll see. But we left the ecstatic episode on a bit of a cliffhanger because we didn't know what was going to happen next. Ed, you were part of Ecstatic. You're part of Fossil Fools. What happened between one and the other?
The urge to come out and do it all again was too strong. So I sat and was grumpy for a while. And just prior to the very last Ecstatic gig, Fuzzy Warblers had played the previous night. So in a very much beer-enhanced state, they started playing Books Are Burning, which was a song that Ecstatic would never let me play. And so I pushed myself into the front of the stage and bellowed out the vocals, realizing I didn't actually know the words after all. So it was a sort of a beer session, and Terry was thumping away on the drums behind. And we didn't speak, I think, at all that night. But sometime later, about 6 months later, it turned out that we were working within about 300 yards of each other in Slough. So we got together for lunch and we started talking about, well, what could happen. And at that stage, the Fuzzy Warblers were still going, and they invited me to come along and join them. And we did one gig in 2007, so a couple of years after the end of Ecstatic, at a place called the 12 Bar in Swindon. And as usual, pulled a decent crowd of people in, and we had Holly Partridge's She Beats band playing as a support set to us. And lots of our old friends and various members of the Chambers family turned up to that one. We did a gig, but I have to say, after the highs of Ecstatic, it was a little bit more homemade as a gig.
I'd say a little chaotic.
We had a set list, but people then decided they were changing what instrument they played, so it was a little bit odd. But out of that, Terry and I became close, and we thought, well, we'll have another go. But it did take us a while to get round to doing it, and so in 2007, I was working at the Prince's Trust, and I was running the website and advertised for an assistant web manager. And Dan was one of the 100 people that applied for it. I will tell him he was 7th on the short list of 6, but he'd said that he played keyboards on his CV, so he got the job. And I then spent the next couple of years trying to persuade him to join an XTC tribute band, and he'd never heard of XTC. And it kind of built, and Matt and Terry had played together in the past, but it took us a long while to get going. And it was really through Prince's Trust Christmas parties. So we would put together a band to play the parties. We didn't have an in-house drummer, so Terry would come along and do that. Dan would sing some songs, I'd sing some songs, and we had, I think, our finance director and our assistant marketing director as well. And we do all sorts of covers, anything from Led Zeppelin to Mariah Carey and the Pogues, and it was great fun to play this stuff. But through that, we absolutely knew that Dan was the right person to come in and join us. And by that time, Matt, Terry, and I had been sort of thumping away in rehearsal studios for a couple of years, with never really finding the fourth member to make this happen. And it finally sort of came to. So a lot of half rehearsals to try and get the momentum going. And finally, in 2010, we made our debut. So quite a lot of development had gone into it. And the very first gig was supporting Tin Spirits, which of course had Dave Gregory in it.
That's a bit of a name drop.
Yes.
Terry, does that accord with your memories of what happened, or maybe you should wind back and tell us about Fuzzy Warblers before you tell us about what happened next?
Well, I joined Fuzzy Warblers through the old XTC Idea Forum back in sort of 2003, 2004. We were rehearsing in a studio in Walthamstow prior to the 2005 convention that we played at, that Ed had joined in with us at the Moonrakers in Cricklade. Pretty much the history of Fossil Falls from that point on is exactly as Ed said. I've known Matt since 1991. We've been in various groups throughout that time, other covers bands and what have you. But Matt has always been my mainstay as a bass player. I think between the two of us, it's quite a nicely knit and tight rhythm section. But he keeps me on my toes as well.
Matt, does all of that accord with you?
Yes, it does. I had kind of stopped playing when Terry approached me. I just moved house into this sort of derelict cottage in this little village, and he found out. I said, "I'm putting this XTC tribute band together." And he knew I knew of XTC. I'd had a couple of albums. My brother got me into them. I said, "Look, I'm really busy doing this house. Come back, and if you haven't found anyone in 6 months, just come back and speak to me." And 6 months to the day, the phone went, and it was Terry. So it's been 6 months. You want to join us band? It just would not leave me alone. So I'd nearly got rid of all my gear. That was all in storage. I hadn't played for a while. I thought, I'm going to be useless. I can't play that sort of stuff. But I'll come on to a couple of rehearsals, and you can see how, I've dipped off and I hadn't played for a couple of years at a time, and we just take it from there. But it was just so enjoyable. We went out and did a couple of charity gigs, myself, Ed and Terry, with no rehearsal as such, just sort of thrown together a set, and it was so enjoyable that just it reignited the flame in me to continue playing again. So, and then it seemed like it took a while, a couple of 3 years to get together, but it didn't seem like that. I mean, it just went really quickly to our first gig, and then wallop, there we were at the Furnace in Swindon, supporting.
But we were doing all sorts of ridiculous cover bands.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody would do a chat, and we were Depeche Mode. We were with Free Chords for another one. We were sort of a 60s.
Oh, Freeman Hardy Willis Overdrive, I think, was one of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, okay, that was another one, yeah. And we did all these sort of tribute, these things. So what's the theme of this party? Oh, right, we'll put together a set for this stuff. And it's all ropey stuff, but, it's great fun to do. And you recognise through that we got on really well as people. And that's the thing which really defines this band. Everybody is a friend, and everybody really cares about each other. And it's a lovely... when you've been in other bands that aren't so familial, it's lovely just to get together with your friends and wallow in that. And we recognise the things we're good at, and recognise the things we're less good at, and we have to work harder at. But it's that sort of that friendship has carried us through. So and that's I think that's the defining thing about the Fossil Falls.
Mm-hmm. And I'm fascinated, Dan, about your story, because the fact that you're still here suggests that something has happened in between not knowing XTC and being in an XTC cover band. What happened when you were introduced to XTC?
Well, I'd been a bit of a frustrated musician prior to getting that job at the Prince's Trust, which I still claim that I got on merit, despite Ed winding
you did,
me
absolutely.
It might have just got me over the line, mentioning that I played keyboards. But yeah, I'd been a frustrated musician, done one or two bits and pieces, but never really kind of had the impetus to get out there and do something. So I'm very thankful to Ed for sort of dragging me out of my shell and doing those kind of Christmas parties and bits and pieces while we were at Prince's Trust. Yeah, when Ed said about this XTC tribute band, I think I did think, and who's XTC again? And did a bit of sort of digging around and realised I did know at least some bits and pieces about them. I'd seen Andy Partridge in his round glasses on Top of the Pops 2 doing senses. And I remember that a good friend of mine at uni had got very excited when Apple Venus was coming out. I remember him doing me a compilation tape with Wrapped in Grey on. And coincidentally, I think when I listened to your podcast, his name is read out as one of the Knights in Shining Karma, Michael Sutcliffe. So if it's the same one, then that would sort of make sense. I want it to be the same one. So hi, Mikey, if it is you, hello, mate. But yeah, and as Ed said, once he finally sort of dragged me out and I met Terry and Matt, the instant thing was, this is just a lovely group of people to be playing with. And I think as I started to learn the songs as well, I became more and more interested, because it was clearly there was so much richness in this catalogue. And I was late 20s and coming to this band with all this music, and I didn't know 99% of it. So I'm still sort of unearthing occasional things that I haven't heard before. But so I'd echo what the others were saying. The best thing was finding some really, really good people to play some music with.
Even if you got on with the people, if you really didn't like the music of XTC, then I imagine you wouldn't have continued. There must have been, am I right in assuming that you became an XTC fan?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday. How different my entry to the band and the band's music has been compared to the others. Because while they were still a going concern, I didn't know of them and was quite young. In fact, I was born in 1980, so I've come to them sort of less the kind of band and the people and sort of having any relationship with seeing them on stage or on TV or whatever, and more just purely through listening to the music. And yeah, like I was saying, there's what I love is just the richness of it. And I remember Ed saying once that every time he listened to a song, he'd hear something new that he hadn't heard before, which is the brilliance of the music, but also very much so the challenge of trying to recreate it on stage, particularly the later stuff with all the sort of intricacies and layers there.
Yeah, and well, that is a question that I could ask all of you, which is that thing of, it's all very well being a fan of any band, but the more you dig into it, the more you have to get the very close subtleties. You have to learn about what's really going on in the records. Maybe I could start with you, Ed, because Dan just mentioned you. But is that the case that you still find stuff in there?
Oh, all the time, and particularly because it takes us a while to sort of prepare for a gig, and the format has become that we have a Zoom conversation with about 20 suggestions of songs, and then we talk through each one and then gradually vote them down to where we get to about 10 new songs. Then we work on them on our own and then come and bring them together in a studio and then try and play them at the same time and see if they work or not. And some songs you just say, that's a nice idea. I mean, we tried to do Easter Theatre, which we worked quite hard on for the last gig, and we're really pushing this, and eventually say it's a great song, but we can't quite do it. So recognizing that the things sometimes they really don't work. So yeah, just back off from them. This time we're taking on currently we've got 10 new songs for the set of gigs that we've got coming up. So that's and because we're then digging into those songs, you're listening for every detail of it. And yesterday, playing many of them for the first time, you think, well, I've played along to these things, this will be fine. And you start then playing them without a backing track, and you go, hang on, what's the cue for this thing? And Jake wasn't with us yesterday. He wasn't able to make the rehearsal yesterday. And we're thinking, well, that's a guitar line, needs to do that. And so you suddenly think, oh, so you actually have to really think about that. And there's that the change between that chorus and the middle eight is slightly different each time they do it. So it messes with the head. You think you know this stuff. You think you know the lyrics of these songs, and then you try and summon them out of your head and think, oh my God, it is really complicated. But each time it is just the richness of doing it and digging in on a different instrument. So in a lot of cases with the where I have done songs before with the ecstatic, I was coming at it from the point of view of being a bass player or perhaps a guitarist. And this time I'm trying to sing and play guitar, so each time you approach a song with a very different focus of an instrument you're listening to, you hear a completely different song, and that's the richness of it. That's the prog rock of XTC, and I don't know any other band that does that, where you peel the levels of the layers off the onion. There's more and more and more and more richness into it, and this has still been. Where are we now? We're 2022. This is 40 years that I've been listening to this band and still fascinated about how can I be discovering things. And there was a song we've never done before off English Settlement, which we were playing through yesterday. I'm thinking, and I'd sort of dismissed it. For 40 years I've been largely skipping it. So I know we were playing it yesterday. I'm thinking, well, actually, it's quite good. Oh, that's quite. Oh, there's something in that. And some of the things we sort of started up. Well, I'm not really sure we should do this. And then we say, no, we've worked on it. Let's have a go. And you play it, and gradually the groove starts going, and you think, oh yes, I can imagine this working. And it's a lovely process. And I think we're all fairly similar standards of musician. None of us is a virtuoso, but we have a basic grasp of our instruments. We're very much aided by Jake, and Jake is somebody who just lives and breathes music. So when we get him, we feel very lucky, because you say, can you go off and learn that Dave Gregory guitar solo, and he'll come back absolutely nuance perfect, and he just sort of sprinkles magic. So as long as the rest of us can get a groove going and a sound right, we know that he will sort of bring it through, and add all the color on top of it that will really make it lift it out of the commonplace. So, and that's he's been sort of in the last half dozen gigs has taken us to a completely different level.
Terry, what was the rehearsal like yesterday then? That's a good example. 10 new songs. How did those songs start at the beginning of the day and finish the end of the day?
Well, bearing in mind we hadn't played together since October, I thought it went really well. And the fact that like I say, some of these songs we haven't played before, though we've listened to and listened to and listened to countless times, and then realizing, oh, hang on a minute, there's something. You work through you work through things. Oh, that must have been overdubbed, and you're trying to work things out. There's so many intricacies. I mean, from a drumming point of view, I mean, I still rate Terry Chambers as a fantastic drummer for what he did, and his timekeeping absolutely impeccable. The other drummers as well, everything they put into the XTC parts, but there are things you think you can't play all that in one go. So I'm trying to emulate these bits and pieces. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For me, it's always been a challenge, and it's a fantastic and lovely challenge to do. I've recently bought some electronic gubbins for my drums to try and emulate some of the drum sounds as well, especially for the Black Sea, English Settlement, even up to Nonsuch with those gated sounds. And I'm just having a ball playing this stuff and finding out that all these bits and pieces. And let's say with the rehearsal yesterday and just get going through these songs, thinking this actually sounds really good. With the four of us just in the pocket, in the groove, and just thrashing these things out, it's just so much fun to do.
It's a logistical exercise, because Dan lives in Bristol, I live in Windsor, Terry's in Feltham, and Matt's up in Aylesbury.
Amersham.
No, Amersham.
Yes.
So we're geographically quite distant from each other. So it takes a lot of time to drag us together, and we normally end up in little studios on bits of farmland. But it's lovely just to come together and to wallow in the music, and a nice air conditioned studio yesterday. That was really
it's very nice.
timely.
Lovely. You need one at the moment as well. And I'm just kind of thinking that kind of logistical thing is because you've all got day jobs, you've all got other lives. You're not, some of you've got other bands. You can't dedicate, every hour of the day to this thing. So is it a question of being, I don't know, good enough musicians to learn the parts individually and then coming together and then piecing it together like a jigsaw?
Helps to do the homework.
Yeah, practice at home, rehearse the music.
It did used to be a bit easier before I left London. I moved out to Bristol after we had twins, and we realised we needed to live in something bigger than a two-bed flat. So Bristol it was. But yeah, that, I mean, we had a hiatus for how long did we? It was when I had
6
twins.
years.
about
6 years.
6 years. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we officially split up in 2011, and then reformed in 2017. But yeah, we'd mentioned, so we got our first gig, and it's supporting Dave Gregory in Tin Spirit. So that's a big thing from Ecstatic, where we never had any engagement apart from with the families of the bands. Suddenly, we're finally in a place where we're playing uh, XTC songs in front of a band, including Dave Gregory, and he's kind of looking down at us. And I have to say, it's impossible to do when your heroes start there. Your fingers start sticking to the guitar strings. There's no chance that any solo comes out, and the footage is there, and every single solo I start in, a semitone out. It's everything goes wrong in this thing, but we're
He wrote
yes,
this.
yeah, and it was, but it was lovely to have their support
they were really supportive
get
as
going.
well. I'll never forget
Yeah.
that first sound check, because we'd been rehearsing for a long time, and then I couldn't believe we were supporting Dave Gregory's band, and then we get sort of set up, and Dave Gregory's guitar rack is sort of there with however many guitars, and they'd already sound checked, and I thought, oh, they'll go off and do whatever, but they were sat up on the balcony. sort of leaning over while we sound checked. I thought, oh, good Lord. And I think it was one of those early ones pre-Jake, where I was doing a bit of singing, a bit of guitar and a bit of keyboards, and I thought, I'm going to just sort of fall over rather than get this right. But I do remember them giving us a big round of applause after we played our first song in that sound check. I instantly sort of relaxed. And yeah, they couldn't have been more sort of supportive and encouraging.
I was so nervous on that first gig. So nervous. I'm nervous for every gig, to be honest with you.
And it was the same venue that we'd played the last Ecstatic gig, so I'd gone from sort of this was a return 5 years after the event to the same place, but at least we got Dave Gregory there and we're playing in front of it. And then we then did a whole series of as with Ecstatic, sort of back and forth between Swindon and Hope and Anchor and Dublin Castle, so the same sorts of venues, and we started to stretch ourselves. So into, I think, third or fourth gig, we decided to do the whole of Black Sea, start to finish, and that's the first. We hadn't done that sort of thing with Ecstatic, so that once again, it was really forcing us into, when you realise you're going to be playing Travels in Nylon, you're really stretching their expectations, because it's not something that they ever did live. That's where the magic starts to take over. You're trying to present things that have never come out live. And we started to get some incredible reactions from it. So it started to get that same sort of buzz that had come with the Ecstatic of, oh my God, people are just hanging on what you're playing. And it was just, absolutely electric atmospheres that we started to get with the gigs.
Matt, do you feel some sort of responsibility because of that? Because you've got these fans who haven't seen, maybe they've never seen XTC live, and this is that one chance to do that. Do you feel as though there's a responsibility to do right by the music?
It takes an incredibly large amount of dedication, because when you do these gigs that, particularly one of the gigs we did, the first one we did at Water Rats with Jake, that there's this particular guy, American guy, who just happened to be in town with work, and he popped in, and he just did not take his eyes off me all night. He was watching what I played. His eyes were following my fingers up the fretboard. And
we all do that, Matt.
I know. It feels such a responsibility to get these things right, and it does take a large amount. I mean, we've all got jobs, so I mean, I tend to finish early on a Friday, and I spend the whole afternoon playing the songs over and over again. And like, as Ed mentioned, every time you hear the song, you hear something else in there that you hadn't heard before. And when we came back after the layoff, I had a better set of headphones. I think, Christ, I was playing that wrong the whole time we were together. I was like a semitone out, but luckily no one noticed. So now, especially with Jake in the band, who's a proper musician as such, so it's just dedication to playing it right. And it just makes it's so enjoyable. It really is enjoyable. We were all great friends, as the guys have mentioned. It's just a fantastic band. It's a fantastic amount of music that we're playing, and we're just so dedicated to getting it right. it's an honour, really, to be honest with you. And I think the rest of the guys feel the same, that to do the songs justice, we work very hard at it, and it is an honour.
I think for me, it's the synergy of the entire thing. The fact that we're we're a 5-piece band, but we play more than what a 5-piece would do sonically. I'm in wonderment sometimes. There's the stuff that sort of between, say, Ed and Dan playing keyboards with Jake playing the guitar. There just seems to be this cohesiveness that works so well. And as Matt said, the fact that it's been played amongst friends, and we're fans of the music, and we're playing these to fans of the music. It's like no other thing that I've done with any other band.
And could you say you've alluded to the 10 new songs that you're rehearsing? Could you say what some of those are?
Or that would be giving away the surprise.
Well,
it's a secret.
For the next half hour of the podcast, I'm going to be guessing which songs are.
We will raise our ears when you get one right. Oh, we're all wearing headphones, and you won't be able to see. There's quite a lot of mummer things that we've kind of stumbled into the set, and that's not really an album that we've done a lot of. There are still some albums that we've not touched at all, and probably won't get around to, because we ration what we do, and we work our way towards it. We started promoting our own gigs from fairly early on in this incarnation, rather than just trying to go to venues and find something. So we promote the gigs, we hire the venue, and we are so much helped because there are active fan groups out there, and so we can normally pull. Well, in most cases, we sell out the venue. So it's worked. The model's just about work, so we can get enough people in to then justify to be able to spend money on the rehearsing and get through. And that you're going to have a great atmosphere. So 150, 200 people in the back room of a pub, absolutely loving it and bellowing the songs back at you. So it becomes huge. In our little world, they're huge events, and we've started to get Stuart Lee was at the last gig. We've had Paul Partner as a regular attendee to all these things, so we start to get the same people. But then there's a guy who's the Adrian Durham, who's on talk radio. He's always at the gigs, and they're just sort of, and you say, oh, I recognise that guy from a film, and he's singing away at our things, and it's lovely, this sort of this family of people that turn up year after year, and we don't overdo it. Maybe 2 gigs a year, but it's lovely to bring those people together.
And I can remember I think it was the last time that I saw you in London, and from the audience point of view, when you're just all the stuff that you're describing, there's this. I had a very sort of strong sense of being in a parallel universe where all of these songs that we were hearing were being hits because everybody knew them and everybody was singing along. And just in that little bubble, it felt like something, there'd been some warp in space-time that meant that these songs were as widely known as they really should have been. And that sense that you're talking about, people singing back and being all part of that same fandom and that family came across very strongly, I think.
Well, and it's frankly a better world. This is how the world should be. Everybody knows XTC songs and sings along them, and you don't go and see avatars or whatever it is. Actually, I'm going to see avatars. So
are you? Are you going to do that?
Yeah.
That'll be the next for you. You could have the Fossil Fools avatars.
Yeah.
Oh, make me 12 years younger, please.
Well, you already look. Matt's lost our load of weight. He already looks young and beautiful.
You're very kind.
Some of us are old and decrepit. So.
Yeah.
But for a band that necessarily, for all the reasons we've said, doesn't play that often, you're not playing every night. It's many people would think that was hugely risky to introduce that many songs into each set. But I think I'm right in saying that you've pretty much always changed every time that you've done a new set. Every time you've done a new gig, you've got a new set. And so I don't know what the question is there, but that maybe you could say something about the balance that you like to get within a set.
We're called fools for a reason.
Yeah.
Nobody would do this thing, and if it was a day in, day out, and if you take the example of the XTC, they go out and play the same set for an entire tour, and that's the mechanics of what they do, and they get really, really good at the songs by playing repetition. We've never had that, so I think have we ever done 2 gigs in 2 nights? I don't think so in
No.
this
No.
lineup. So there's I don't think we could actually. We'd run out of puff. This is fans playing songs to other fans, and it's a different thing. We're not hyper professional musicians. We're just people who love playing it, and we just happen to be the ones on the stage.
And that then opens you up to going off down curious routes or trying something unusual, because there isn't that expectation that you're going to be delivering something.
And yes, and you know, we've necessarily ended up with, on occasions, that there was one gig we did at Water Rats where Dan was sadly ill, so he couldn't come along. So we ended up having to cobble together a fourth member of the band. So we found Imogen, who was a young student who was an XTC fan, and she came along and played keyboards for a couple of songs.
And she supported us on the night as well.
Yeah, and we had, and that's how we found Jake, because he started posting these wonderful solo acoustic versions of songs, and your jaw just hits the floor because he's playing absolutely brilliant things and he's singing at the same time. I thought, well, we need to get him in the band, or else somebody else will, and we'll be absolutely redundant as a band. But actually, he came along and I think on the back of one rehearsal, did half the gig, and he was just absolutely amazing. And then we had Steve Tilling came along and performed half a dozen songs at the end of that evening. So that was a gig where we were flying by the seat of our pants, but it just worked because of the that feeling that carries us all through.
So you're always playing to a home crowd in that sense.
Yes.
And so then when you're deciding, when you're coming together, putting a set together, what are you looking for? Are you trying to get a sort of historical mix, or you've described that case when you did a whole Black Sea set? Are you I can imagine, for example, here's a leading question, that if you just did songs from the first 2 albums, then many people would be disappointed not to hear the hits.
I think we all love we have our sweet spots of the canon, but it's actually always nice to just pick something else. And because we act democratically, if somebody suggests a song and somebody else says let's do it, then we'll have a go at doing it, and that's lovely, and that just takes us off in different directions. And we're very different things. I mean, I'm 20 years older than Dan, so across the thing, and I'm 30 years older than Jake. So we've got a huge, we across the decades, 60s, 50s, 40s, and 30s. These are all people with different age groups approaching those songs, and they pick up on different songs across their catalogue.
It's interesting how we all do suggest different songs. Usually, when we're putting the long list together, it's a completely separate kind of bunch of suggestions from everyone. And as Ed said earlier, there's a sort of whittling down while we sort of with furrowed brows and sort of thinking, how will we put a serviceable version of that together? And it's like, then we get down to a bunch that we think, oh well, we'll give those a go and see how they feel. But we sort of feel our way into a kind of set list, I think, and thinking about an evenness to who's going to sing what, and working out who's going to be on what instruments. But I think that the bringing new material in feels like because we do get people returning to come and see us, that feels like a bit more value for them if we're not playing the same set each time, and it keeps it fresh as well for us. I know I really enjoy just trying to. I was sat at my piano earlier with how you can slow down a track on YouTube to quarter speed. That is brilliant for working out Barry Andrews' keyboard bits and pieces. I don't think there's any other way to do it. But yeah, I was doing that earlier with my son.
Unfortunately, all the chords sound like.
But I also like, when you're talking about YouTube, is now that with Steve Wilson's instrumentals, some of those tracks that we have worked on, we've got instrumental versions. Without the vocals, you can hear clarity, and for me, that there's always little nuggets in there that I thought, oh, I didn't realise that. Okay, I'll incorporate that. But it's like, when we played our last gigs, and we we segued, for example, Living Through Another Cuba with Helicopter, and it was just something that we just got inspired to do, but it worked so well. The same with Towers of London and Early Enough for Us, because the tempos were almost there. We thought, yeah, we could try this, and I think it came across really well.
Mm-hmm. And what's about that point that Terry effectively raises there, which is how truthful and accurate and faithful you should be to the originals, because it strikes me that you're not coming in doing completely radical revisions of the original material. You're roughly in the area that the records had, but at the same time, by necessity, you're different musicians. You're playing music that never was played live, even from that, as you say, Travels and Nylon. It was never played live, even when they were playing live. So you automatically put yourself into a different place. How do you feel about that level of truthfulness, accuracy, or whatever? What's the aim there?
Well, we're doing it at volume. We're doing it in sweaty trousers, and we're dealing with the limitations of our vocal cords and things. So we are. It's necessarily a compromise. I think it's really helped expanding to being a 5-piece, because now suddenly you aren't necessarily trying to sing and play guitar at the same point. It gives us a little. I think our vocals have improved an awful lot by virtue of not all having to work out what is that day. And every time we do a new song, I learn a new chord, because of these weird things that you're trying to do with your fingers just to make that thing. And then eventually after the 20th time of playing it, you actually work out how to play that chord and sing those words and remember what those words are at the same time. So it is always a compromise, but I think we are much closer to it, because we've got I think we're helped by playing at places with decent PA systems and with good sound engineers, and having a decent grasp of our instruments, and it works. It just works. We've got people. The feedback we get is wonderful. We don't. I think the first time around there were occasional gigs where somebody would be grumpy about something, but actually we just get a wall of approval this time, as we do it these days, and it's lovely. It is.
I feel like a lot of the
band.
people who will come and watch the gigs are such big fans of XTC that they have the music in their head, and we're playing our version. We're reminding them of it, and you see them, right? They've often got their eyes closed and singing along, and they're remembering their own XTC memories and just enjoying the music of the band, and they fill in the bits we miss out in their heads anyway. So
we're very lucky, because unlike any other band that I've been in, we have somebody here who's actually seen XTC live, which is Terry.
Yes.
Everybody else is imagining this world.
No.
Tell us your story then, Terry.
It was the only time I'd gone with school friends to the Hammersmith Palais. It was the December gig that has been immortalised in the XTC Live in Concert CD that was on the Transistor Blast set, and previously before that released by BBC. But that was missing several tracks at the beginning. The CD itself didn't really give justice to the energy, and I was there, and it was just absolute ecstatic energy watching these guys just absolutely thrash it out. I was just my eyes were completely transfixed to Terry Chambers at the time. It was like this lovely Tama drum kit he was using. It was just one of those special times. I've been to a few gigs as well. The TC&I gigs that we went. I think I went with Ed. Matt's gone. Those gigs were absolutely special, and I thought the XTC gig was just as special at the time as a little 15-year-old I was then.
Mm-hmm. And I saw them at pretty much the same age and the same tour just a few days before you in Liverpool, so I know exactly what you mean, and particularly if we think about you as a drummer and Terry Chambers as a player in XTC at that point, and it was almost like it was illegal to have a pause between songs, so he would hit the final cymbal in one song and already he'd be playing the next song. It was breathless. I mean, is that something that you emulate?
I'd listened to drummers, but I'd never actually played a drum kit. And in fact, it wasn't until about 1981, 82 that I actually sat down on a drum kit to physically play it. And I went to a Police concert in 1983 at the Wembley Arena, and they just cemented it for me. I thought, I've got to get down and do this.
And as you were saying, Terry, before we just started recording, you were just alluding to the fact that your Fossil Fools gigs are long. They're 2.5 hours or something. You've got a lot of material in there. particularly actually for a drummer, this is a question, but it's a question for all of you really. The level of energy and subtlety as well that you have to maintain in a set for that long I can only imagine it's very difficult, because if you are sort of thrashing through the noisier numbers, that's fair enough. But then if you hit a yacht dance or something that requires a bit of subtlety, then you've got to be on your game the whole 2.5 hours, don't you?
I think when you've got someone like Ed and Matt next to you, and he's asked that they sometimes ask you to rein it in a bit.
He gets the look.
Because for me, it's always nervous energy. To see me before a gig, I normally disappear. I've normally gone to
The toilet.
Mainly, or outside, just to get myself just clear-headed. It's all nervous energy that comes out. But let's say 2.5 hours later, I'm just full of energy again. I would just love to redo that. When COVID hit, that was a big problem for me. I've played other gigs for other bands, and do a 2.5 hour gig with Fossil Fools. I did a 30-minute gig for another band, and I was absolutely spent with the after effects of COVID. It does take a lot out of me, but I just love doing it, and I don't know what the other guys think.
Terry hasn't worked out that we always stick in 4 early numbers at the beginning of the set just to try and work out his volume issues, so that we have 4 early songs just to bash through, and then we can calm him down and sort of throw a blanket over him, and he just sort of calms down and relaxes into the gig. So by the end, we can do Wrapped in Grey, which we always love to do, with a couple of keyboards and just really strip back the thing. And we've all kind of relaxed into the whole experience. But a lot of it is energy management. So we're not as old as Mick Jagger, or some of us are getting towards that era. But it's you do actually have to manage your energy levels to survive. And when it was just me and Dan singing, frequently your voice would go 3/4 of the way through the gig, you're running out of breath because you are
You still got to do no fugs.
blurting out these lyrics. And there are so many songs, studio songs, where they haven't left the gaps for you to breathe between verse and chorus things. So that's a difference between the latter years and the early years, that they're not built for live performance. So something like Mayor of Simpleton, you have to sort of manage how to carry those vocal lines through, because there are no places for you to breathe in those songs.
Something we've not mentioned either is the lyrics and the challenge of getting our mouths around, particularly the some of those Andy Partridge lyrics, Mayor of Simpleton being a great example. And in the midst of a 2-hour set, trying to work out what the second verse of That Wave, it's we sort of, I think we do pretty well actually, considering, but that's always a challenge.
Burning with Optimism's Flames always springs to mind. I'm very glad I've never tried to sing that one. I always leave that to you.
The other thing in this area is, melodically, they're prepared to go to places that even you can even hear Colin and Andy straining for some of those notes, and it is quite a big vocal range, isn't it? And I can only imagine that's even harder when you're onto song number 17 in your set. How have you found that? I know that Jake is doing more of that, but Dan, when the singing was coming down to you, how did you cope?
Once or twice, I think, in the early gigs, we shifted things down a key. Don't know if we should admit to that. Is that heresy?
I don't think we ever did.
Didn't we? Or maybe that.
I don't believe.
No, I don't think we did actually.
I don't think we have done.
We tried, but it didn't sound right, so we
so we left it as it was.
Oh.
Maybe I begged and begged, and but it is challenging, and Colin and Andy have got quite high registers, and again, some of those later albums, Andy only had to get it right one take. I mean, he's got a brilliant voice anyway, but it's a challenge to hit some of those high notes, and particularly in the midst of a long set, which is again another reason why having Jake on board is so brilliant, because as well as being a virtuoso guitar player, he's got a brilliant voice, and so we're sharing the songs out between more people, and he's yeah, and he's doing a really good job in the ones he's singing.
Colin did admit when I chat with him prior to the TCI warm up gig is that they tune the guitars down half a tone. So other people don't notice, but it just gives you that tiny little nuance. We don't do that. We hit the original notes.
Purists. But on the subject of original notes and pure notes, the impact that XTC songs have is as much in the arrangements and the particular notes that they use. I can ask this question of Matt as the bass player, but it could go to any of you, as it is in the songwriting. So my point is that you can't really detach the songwriting from the arrangements. And so if you didn't play a Colin Moulding bass line, then it wouldn't sound like a Colin Moulding song. Do you think that's true to say, Matt?
That is absolutely true. And I think you'd be led outside the venue and hung from the nearest lamppost if you did try and embellish or play something differently. And it wouldn't suit the song. I mean, the bass lines in particular had been written for that particular song, and that Colin's bass playing isn't particularly bassy. Such a lot of it can be quite melodic and almost follow along with the guitars, and at the same time, sometimes play completely different to as you think the bass line should go for that song. And I've got a bit of trouble hearing in my left ear, so sort of to try and pick out some of. And as I say, when I got a better pair of headphones, I was learning that I wasn't playing it particularly right. You have to just do the hard work to give the song the justice that the guys and girls turning up at the gigs deserve. And you every now and again you'll catch the eye of someone and you'll get the thumbs up that you've done it right. So you'll know if you're gonna do it wrong, because you will, as I say, you'll be let out into the street and thrashed.
They're not a violent audience.
No.
They're nice people.
But Ed, what about the similar question, same question really, as the actual position that you put your fingers in to create those weird chords? Presumably accuracy pays dividends.
It does. I've never been particularly accurate. I'm very. We allude to Jake. Jake is a proper musician, so I think in the last month he was playing bass with his band Preston Miko. So they were headlining at one of the stages at 2000 Trees Festival. A couple of weeks before that, he was playing lead guitar in a band in Italy, and I think he's missing our next rehearsal because he's playing at the Reading and Leeds Festival on drums. So he's a proper musician that does all of these things, and music kind of flows through him. He can pick up any old guitar, and suddenly, he'll press 3 buttons on an amplifier, and it will suddenly sound magnificent because he just has music that flows through him. So we latterly we've become much more musically supporting to allow him to have the gaps in which he then sprinkles the nuances. We used to do that wave in the kind of the first flourish of Fossil Falls, and I would attempt the Dave Gregory solo. I don't think I got more than about 30% of it right. Now we play it, and it's 100% wonderful and lovely, and I enjoy watching somebody playing beautiful guitar lines, and it is that pleasure now. And we play our gigs with great big grins on our face. There's somebody filmed the set that we did at the Victoria last year, and it's just great fun. A bunch of people just having a laugh, enjoying what they're doing. They're not grimacing, going, "Oh, I got the wrong note." That we're just loving the whole experience.
Trouble is, we're going at such a lick that we've got no time to go back and redo that wrong note. It's already in the next song.
Dan, I'm just thinking about that thing of you discovering XTC relatively late. As opposed to, I suppose, what Terry was talking about, that he and I were discovering them pretty much in real time, as it were, and each new album came out and we could hear it. Have you got a favourite period of XTC's music? Is it all sort of open to possibility? In
some ways, a bit of a challenging question, because I didn't experience all the studio albums as they came out. I still don't have pieced together the chronology properly. You can hear the difference between some very, very early stuff and much later stuff, but the kind of detail of which album came before which one, I've never had cause to work that out. But that said, I think as I've sort of filled in the gaps, sort of English Settlement is definitely a favourite. Probably generally more the later stuff. It was the same with the Beatles. The bit after they stopped having to tour and could just let off the shackles. There's it brings so much more possibility that just having a studio to play with, and yeah, it is intimidating listening to some of those multi-layered tracks sometimes and thinking about how we might do something with them. But yeah, I think I'd definitely say sort of later rather than earlier. But then that said, in terms of playing the early stuff live, it's so much fun. It's real, we get a real sort of energy going, and yeah, they always get a real sort of strong reaction from the crowd. So can I say all of it?
Yes, you can. That's normally the answer I give. Or yeah,
all of it, apart from a lot of Go To, and isn't that that's the same?
That was the first album I heard. Go To.
And yeah,
Really?
there are some very enthusiastic fans of Go To. They're out there, and I like Go To.
I stole it from my brother. He's not listening. I hope.
And that actually, yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. Have you done Battery Bride, something like that? Where you just get into a rhythm, and you were talking about getting into a groove when you were rehearsing yesterday. That there are certain songs that you can that must be very pleasurable to play live.
This is you trying to guess, is it?
This is the beginning of my
Battery
guess.
Brides was not one of the songs that we did.
I've started on the second album. I'm going to work my way through all.
Well, your 20 questions has number one wrong. We are not doing Battery Brides.
I think we tried it in rehearsal once, didn't we?
Did we?
Did we?
I think we might have done very
I don't
early
know
on.
we did.
Very early on, we did, yeah.
There are a few which are a kind of drone songs that you kind of build up. So Travels in Nylon, Complicated Game, Beating of Hearts that sort of share that you need an E chord rumbling and below that to just kind of build up, and you work yourself into a trance of the song. So we try and avoid having more than one or maybe two of those in a set. It's something that builds and builds and builds, and it has a drone quality, and you are sort of absorbed into a trance like state by listening to the song.
And very hypnotic.
And those are the hypnotic thing, which is probably the area of the Battery Brides thing. I don't know if anybody's ever shown any interest in doing All Along the Watchtower, to do a cover of a cover of
a cover of a cover. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah. Terry, do you have that similar reaction that Dan was just talking about? That it's a separate question to what is your favorite period of XTC. It's like, what's your favorite to play, and would it be true, for example, to say that playing the Terry Chambers era music is more satisfying than later, or is that not the case?
For me, I learned most of the XTC stuff prior to Fossil Falls was the Terry Chambers stuff, but having listened to all the other albums, I must say that I really, really love the way that Dave Mattox approached the drums. Looking at the Gus Dudgeon video, for example, I mean, you listen to None Such. Those drums are they're almost in your face. They're so punchy, so powerful. But you look at him in the studio, and he's very, very deftly playing. He's not whacking 6 bells out of the drums. He's really playing with a gracefulness and intent. It's made me appreciate the likes of None Such so much more. The Big Express, very, very metallic sounding from a percussive point of view, with the introduction of the Linn drums and everything else. It's actually quite a nice marriage. Pete Phipps did really, really well on Mama and the Big Express. And personally, I mean, my favorite drummer has to be Terry Chambers. But my favorite 3 albums are English Settlement at the top of the heap, then Black Sea, and then Drums and Wires. Drums and Wires was the thing that really, really pushed me to play drums. None Such is a close fourth to that. I just find that with every album that XTC have done that have included a different drummer, that drummer's brought something fresh. But I think as far as a cohesive unit goes, after Terry Chambers, I think Dave Mattox was the best drummer for XTC to create that cohesive unit. I think that album is just it's lush, and I think that Dave Mattox as a drummer, as an XTC drummer, would have been, if they could tour, if they could have toured then, that would have been it for me.
Yeah, I can see that. And I'm just thinking, you're not telling me what songs you are playing at the convention or at the Water Rats after that, but are there some songs that you feel as though that you have to play? Would you have a riot if you didn't play Making Plans for Nigel, for example? Because you're not in the situation that EXTC are in, where there's a set of expectations that the fans will have that you will get those hits, although their set is pretty varied as well. But do you have an obligation?
There may be a riot at the convention. So we have been in a field of one in the UK for quite a long time, and now EXTC exists, and we do check out their set list, and they were very good when they started. They had very 50% Colin, 50% Andy songs, and they've and gradually they're sort of changing that balance. And we are, from the point of view, is we are, as fans, would like to see a breadth of thing. If there were two bands and we were saying that playing the same stuff all the time, it wouldn't work. I think we've deliberately taken out some songs from the set. So things like, I think we're dropping Towers of London. I think that was one of them. We're going there. There are other songs that we know they're now doing in their set. So it's pointless for us to both to be doing the same songs. I don't, the biggest hit singles we will play. Whether we do them at the convention is a different thing, because the convention is slightly different because Matt's away in America. So I'm reverting to playing bass at that thing. So we're sort of, once again, it's a slightly different version of what we've done before. And some of that will be the limitations of I can't play Mayor of Simpleton, so we won't be doing Mayor of Simpleton. So, but there's some practical things of it. But what we will do will be great and have lots of high energy behind it, and we'll have a blast doing it. And then we'll be much more into our own territory with the Water Rats gig in October, and then in November in Swindon, November 25th, which will actually be our final gig. So that's we will be drawing this particular phase to an end. So this is the kind of the end of the.
Remember where you heard it first, and why is that?
It's done its course. I think that will be the 19th gig that we've done as the Fossil Fools, and we will have tackled things. I mean, personally, I've played over 90 XTC songs live over the 20 years that I've been doing this in the various different bands. So from a personal point of view, I think I've kind of, if there's a song that I wanted to play, I'll have done it at some stage during that time. I'm not getting any younger. I'm retired now. I'm 62. That's musicians used to have gone away by then. So, and I think it's probably quite a good idea for me to go away and do other stuff. But and I hope other people pick up the baton. I'd love to see young people play XTC songs. I will enjoy going to see EXTC as well, because I'm a fan. I want to hear this music, but it's from my point of view, it feels like we've explored lots of different corners. We've had lovely experiences through doing it, and from a personal point of view, it feels like, okay, perhaps I can move on from this addiction.
And what do the others of you think? Will it be a deeply emotional moment in November when you play Homo Safari for the last time?
Two guesses, both wrong.
No, it's not on here.
I think it definitely will. It's because it's been a long time. Was it 50? How long ago was it when we first? 12 years ago that we first.
2008, I think, was our first set rehearsals. Yeah, 2009.
With a bit of a hiatus, but yeah, it definitely will be, and it does feel like, for me as well, a sort of the right time to be sort of bringing things to a close. Ed had threatened to jack it in a couple of years back, but then I think what with pandemic and various, he was sort of going on about turning 60, and we were sort of ignoring him, but yeah, so we've dragged a couple of extra years out of him. I think he just wants to go and work on his golf handicap. That's what I think I think we're obstructing him from winning the next tournament. But
It's
yeah,
done me a favour actually, because I was threatened to buy another bass guitar, so I don't have to buy one now. So you've done me a favour, Ed. Actually, my wife won't kill me.
I've still been buying equipment, so
you do need a few
Yeah,
more
you're-
cymbals, Terry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is all the more reason that people should be buying their tickets for the fan convention, buying their tickets for the Water Rats, and buying the tickets for Swindon in November, because this is the last chance you'll get to hear this fantastic group. So it's been lovely talking to you. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you at the convention. And
Thank you, Mark.
It'll be great to see each other in real life again. Thank you very much for talking. Sorry,
thank you, Mark.
Jake couldn't be here, but Jake is, as everybody has been saying, is fantastic as well. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you together. So thank you very much. There's so many of you. So, Ed, Terry, Matt, and Dan, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Mark.
What do you call that noise?
Thank you very much, Terry, Ed, Dan, Matt, and in his absence, Jake. You can see Fossil Fools at the XTC Convention in Swindon on Friday, the 16th of September 2022, at the Water Rats in London on the 29th of October, and then a final hurrah at the Vic in Swindon on the 25th of November. Many, many thanks to all of them, and as well to the podcast supporters on Patreon who make it all possible, including the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnett, Kevin Burt, Cale Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Jeff Farris, Leslie Gooch, Robert Graham, Alan Hughes, Marek Kraus, Jess Beckenberg, Robert Lawlaw, Dennis LeCourrier, Liz Lynch, Youssef Murrah, Amy Parkinson, Murray Meikle, Karen Neal, Doug Perry, Mark Reed, James Reimer, Simon Slato, Michael Sutcliffe, Mark Thomas, and Nigel Waller. And if you'd like to support the XTC podcast, and you know you'd like to support the XTC podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Mark Fisher. Thank you very, very much for listening. See you again next time.